Mayor Victor Whitmore smashed the whiskey bottle across his daughter's dog's skull, and the animal collapsed on the lawn without a sound. He laughed, drunk and untouchable, while Sarah screamed and crawled toward her only friend, bleeding in the grass. 16 years of abuse, and no one in Pinewood had ever dared to stop him. But Victor made one mistake that 4th of July. He forgot about the stranger renting the cabin next door. A Navy SEAL who had just watched everything through the fence. A man who had seen enough. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe and follow until the very end. Drop a comment with your city so we can see how far this story travels. Sarah Whitmore's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the 3rd tray of champagne glasses that morning. "Careful," she whispered to herself. "Careful, careful, careful." The July sun was already brutal at 7 a.m., pressing down on Pinewood, Georgia, like a punishment. Sarah had been awake since 4, preparing for her father's Independence Day celebration. The annual event that made Mayor Victor Whitmore look like a saint to everyone who didn't live inside his house. Shadow pressed against her leg, his wet nose nudging her calf. "I know, boy," she murmured, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. "I know you're thirsty. Just let me finish this and I'll get you water." The German shepherd's amber eyes never left her face. He was 6 years old, and he had learned long ago that his job was to stay between Sarah and danger, even when danger wore a $3,000 suit and called itself Daddy. "Sarah!" Her father's voice exploded from inside the house, and she flinched so hard the glasses rattled against each other. Shadow's hackles rose. "Coming!" she called back, her voice steady even though her heart was hammering. "I'm coming, father." She set down the tray and walked toward the back door, Shadow limping slightly behind her. His hip had never healed properly after Victor kicked him down the stairs 2 years ago. The vet had wanted to do surgery. Victor had laughed and said he wasn't spending money on a mutt. Victor Whitmore stood in the doorway, his bulk blocking the light. At 58, he was still a big man with broad shoulders going soft and a gut that strained against his golf shirt. His face was already flushed from the bourbon he'd started drinking at breakfast. "What the hell is taking so long?" he demanded. "The caterers arrive in 2 hours. The ice sculptures aren't set up, the bartender doesn't know where to park, and you're out here playing with that worthless dog. I was setting up the champagne station, father. You asked me to." "Don't." He raised a thick finger. "Don't you dare make excuses. You know what today means. Sheriff Porter is coming. Judge Hamilton. The entire city council. If anything goes wrong, if one single thing is out of place, it won't be. It better not." He stepped closer, and Sarah forced herself not to retreat. Retreat made it worse. Retreat excited him. "Because if you embarrass me today, Sarah, I swear to God, Victor." A woman's voice floated from inside. "Victor, honey, the florist is on the phone." Her father's face transformed. The rage vanished, replaced by a politician's smile, warm and practiced. "Coming, dear," he called sweetly. He looked back at Sarah, and the mask dropped. 2 hours. Don't screw this up." He disappeared inside, and Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Shadow pressed closer, whining softly. "I'm okay," she whispered. "I'm okay, boy. It's fine." But her hands were still shaking. 300 yards away, Garrett Cross sat on the porch of the rental cabin watching. He hadn't meant to watch. He'd come to Pinewood to disappear, to get away from the world, to drink coffee in silence, and try to figure out what the hell to do with the rest of his life. 12 years as a Navy SEAL, and now he was 34 years old, with no war to fight, and no idea who he was without one. But then he'd seen the girl. She moved like someone walking through a minefield. Every step calculated, every gesture controlled. She wore long sleeves in 95-degree heat, and when she reached up to adjust a decoration, her sleeve rode up just enough for Garrett to see the edge of a bruise. Yellow and green. Healing. Which meant there were fresher ones underneath. He'd seen that look before. In villages in Afghanistan, in rescue operations gone wrong in the eyes of people who had stopped believing anyone would save them. His coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but he didn't notice. The back door of the main house slammed open again, and a big man appeared. Even from this distance, Garrett could read the body language. Aggression. Dominance. The way the girl shrank, the way the dog positioned himself. "Son of a bitch," Garrett muttered. He set down his coffee and gripped the porch railing, his knuckles white. "Not your fight," he told himself. "Not your problem. You're a civilian now. You can't just—" The big man's voice carried across the distance, sharp and ugly, though Garrett couldn't make out the words. The girl stood there and took it. Garrett's jaw tightened. He'd taken an oath once, to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. That oath didn't have an expiration date. It didn't come with a discharge notice. But this was suburbia, not a war zone. There were rules here. Laws. He couldn't just intervene because he didn't like the way someone talked to their daughter. The big man went back inside. Garrett watched the girl sag with relief, watched her kneel down to comfort the dog. "Damn it," he said quietly. He picked up his coffee, found it cold, and dumped it over the railing. He had a bad feeling about today. By noon, the Whitmore estate was crawling with Pinewood's elite. Sarah moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible and essential. She refilled drinks, cleared plates, answered questions with a smile that never reached her eyes. She had learned long ago that being useful meant being overlooked, and being overlooked meant surviving. More champagne, Sheriff Porter. The sheriff was a thick-necked man with cold eyes and a badge that he wore like a crown. He'd been in Victor's pocket for 15 years, ever since Victor had made certain evidence disappear after a drunk driving incident. "Thank you, sweetheart." Porter took the glass without looking at her. "Your daddy sure knows how to throw a party." "He does, sir." She moved on before he could say anything else. The backyard was a sea of linen suits and summer dresses of laughter and clinking glasses. A jazz band played near the pool. The mayor worked the crowd like he was running for president, shaking hands, slapping backs, promising things he would never deliver. Sarah's stepmother Diane held court near the rose garden, accepting compliments on a party she hadn't lifted a finger to plan. Nobody asked Sarah how she was doing. Nobody ever did. Shadow stayed close, weaving between her legs, growling softly whenever a guest got too near. Most people ignored him. A few complained about the dog being allowed at a formal event. Victor had told her to lock him in the garage, but Sarah had refused. It was the only thing she'd ever refused. "Hey there, pretty thing." Sarah's stomach dropped. Stan Berkowitz was drunk. That was obvious from the way he swayed, from the glassy sheen in his eyes, from the way his hand reached out and grabbed her wrist before she could step back. "Mr. Berkowitz, come have a drink with us," he slurred. His grip tightened. "Don't be so stuck up. Your daddy won't mind. Please let go of me." "Aw, don't be like that." He pulled her closer, and Sarah's heart rate spiked. "Just one little drink. Just—" Shadow's growl cut through the air. The dog's lips pulled back, revealing teeth, and for one beautiful moment, Stan Berkowitz looked afraid. "Get that mutt away from me," he sputtered, releasing Sarah's wrist. "Victor! Victor, your daughter's dog is attacking guests." The crowd parted. Victor Whitmore strode through champagne glass in hand, face flushed with alcohol and fury. "Sarah." His voice was dangerously quiet. What is going on? Nothing. Father, Mr. Berkowitz was just... Your dog growled at my guest. He was protecting me. Stan grabbed my... Are you calling Stan a liar? The words died in Sarah's throat. Stan had already melted back into the crowd, nursing his wounded pride and another drink. But Victor didn't care about what had actually happened. Victor cared about appearances, about control, about making sure everyone knew who was in charge. No, Father. Then apologize. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. I'm sorry. Louder. I'm sorry. Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good girl. Now put that dog in the garage before he ruins anything else. Father, please. His hand shot out and grabbed her arm, fingers digging into the same spot where Stan had grabbed her. Don't please me. His voice dropped to a hiss. I said put him in the garage, now, or I'll put him down myself. Sarah's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Yes, Father. She turned and walked toward the garage, shadow pressing against her leg with every step. Behind her she heard Victor's booming laugh as he rejoined his guests. Kid's right. What can you do? The crowd laughed with him. Garrett had moved closer. He told himself he was just taking a walk, just stretching his legs, just checking out the perimeter of his rental property. But somehow that walk had brought him right up against the fence that separated his cabin from the mayor's estate. He'd watched the whole thing. The drunk grabbing the girl, the dog defending her, the father taking the drunk's side, punishing his daughter in front of everyone while the real offender walked away. His blood was running hot. Easy, he muttered to himself. Easy cross. Not your fight. But his hands were balled into fists, and his heart was pounding the way it used to before a mission. He watched the girl walk toward the garage, the dog limping beside her. He watched her shoulders shake just once before she straightened them and kept going. 16 years of this, he thought. At least 16 years. That kind of fear doesn't develop overnight. He'd seen it in Afghanistan, in Syria, in places where power meant violence, and violence meant control. He'd seen what happened to people who lived under that kind of tyranny. Some of them broke. Some of them died. And some of them waited for someone to save them. Garrett looked back at the party, at the mayor holding court, at the sheriff and the judge, and all the other people who had to know what was happening in that house and didn't do a damn thing about it. His jaw tightened. Not yet, he told himself. Not yet. Wait and watch. See how it plays out. But his instincts were screaming at him. Something bad was coming. By 7 o'clock, the party had devolved into exactly what Sarah had feared. The respectable guests had gone home. What remained was Victor's inner circle, the men who knew his secrets, who benefited from his power, who would never say a word against him, no matter what they saw. Sheriff Porter, Stan Berkowitz, Deputy Carter Mills, Judge Hamilton, who was too drunk to stand. They sat around the patio table, ties loosened voices, loud laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Victor was drunker than Sarah had seen him in months. That was dangerous. Sarah. She hurried out from the kitchen where she'd been washing dishes for the last 2 hours. Yes, Father. More bourbon. And bring out those cigars from my study. Yes, Father. She retrieved the bottle and the humidor hand steady through long practice. She walked to the table and set them down, keeping her eyes lowered. Good girl. Victor grabbed the bourbon and poured himself another 3 fingers. See, boys, all she needed was a little discipline. She's perfectly trained now. The men laughed. Sarah turned to go. Wait. Stan's voice stopped her. His eyes traveled over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. I think she owes me an apology for earlier. A real apology. Don't you think Victor... Sarah's blood ran cold. I already apologized, Mr. Berkowitz. Not to my satisfaction. Stan pushed back from the table and stood. He was unsteady, but his eyes were focused. Come here. Sarah looked at her father. Victor shrugged. You heard the man? Father. I said. Victor's voice hardened. You heard the man? Sarah's legs wouldn't move. Stan walked toward her, each step deliberate. From the garage, Shadow started barking. Shut that dog up, Victor shouted. But Sarah was already backing away, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Don't be difficult, Stan said, reaching for her. I just want... Sarah grabbed the nearest thing, an empty wine bottle, and swung. The bottle connected with Stan's shoulder, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to make him stumble. Wine dregs splashed across his shirt. You little bitch, Stan snarled. Victor was on his feet. Sarah. He moved faster than a drunk man should, faster than she could retreat. His hand connected with her face, an open palm slap that sent her spinning, crashing into the table, knocking glasses to the stone patio in an explosion of crystal. Sarah hit the ground hard. Blood filled her mouth. The garage door burst open. Shadow came running, ignoring his bad hip, ignoring everything except the need to reach her. He launched himself at Victor, teeth snapping, and his jaws closed around Victor's forearm. Victor screamed, Get off me! He flailed wildly, finally shaking the dog loose. Shadow landed awkwardly, but scrambled up immediately, positioning himself between Sarah and the men, growling with everything he had. Victor grabbed a whiskey bottle from the table. No, Sarah screamed. No, please, don't! Victor brought the bottle down on Shadow's head with all his strength. The glass shattered. Shadow dropped without a sound. Blood began to pool on the limestone black in the fading light. Shadow! Shadow! Sarah crawled to him, her face swelling, her lip split. She gathered the dog in her arms, pressing her hands against the wound, feeling his blood pulse through her fingers. Victor stood over them, breathing hard, the broken bottle still in his hand. Look what you made me do, he said. Look what you made me do, you ungrateful. He raised the bottle. Sarah closed her eyes, and then she heard a sound that didn't make sense. A thud, a crack, a gasp of pain. She opened her eyes. Her father was on the ground. A stranger stood over him, still as stone fists clenched. Touch her again, the stranger said quietly, and I'll break more than your jaw. Sheriff Porter went for his gun. The stranger turned his head, and something in his eyes made the sheriff freeze. Go ahead, the stranger said. Draw it. Give me a reason. Porter's hand fell away from his holster. The stranger looked at Sarah. His eyes were dark, intense, but there was no cruelty in them. Can you walk? She stared at him, uncomprehending. I asked if you can walk. I think so. Good. Pick up your dog. We're leaving. Victor groaned from the ground, clutching his face. You can't. Do you know who I am? The stranger crouched down beside him. I know exactly who you are, he said. You're a man who beats his daughter and kills her dog for fun, and I'm the man who's going to make sure everyone else knows it too. He stood and turned to Sarah. My truck's on the other side of the fence. Can you carry him or do you need help? Sarah looked at Shadow, unconscious and bleeding in her arms. She looked at her father, groaning on the ground. She looked at the men who had watched her suffer for years and done nothing. Then she looked at this stranger, this man who had appeared from nowhere and done what no one else in Pinewood had ever done. I can carry him, she said. Then let's go. He put a hand on her shoulder, gently, giving her time to flinch away if she needed to, and guided her toward the fence. Behind them, Victor found his voice. Porter! Porter! Stop them! That's an order. But the sheriff didn't move. None of them did. and Sarah Whitmore walked out of her father's house for the last time. Victor Whitmore lay on the patio stones, blood dripping from his nose, watching his daughter disappear into the darkness with a stranger. His daughter. His property. His... "Are you going to just stand there?" he snarled at Porter. "Go after them." The sheriff finally moved, pulling out his radio. Victor pushed himself to a sitting position, wincing at the pain in his jaw. The stranger had hit him with surgical precision, hard enough to send him down, not hard enough to kill him, which meant the stranger knew what he was doing. Military, Victor thought. Had to be. He reached for his phone, already composing the narrative in his head. Armed intruder. Kidnapping. His poor, mentally fragile daughter taken at gunpoint. He would find them. He would destroy the stranger. And Sarah would learn once and for all what happened to people who tried to leave. Victor dialed a number. "Gareth, it's Victor. I have a job for you." He listened for a moment. "No, I don't want him arrested. I want him eliminated. And I want my daughter back." He ended the call and looked at the blood staining the patio, at the broken glass, at the spot where his daughter had finally defied him. "You'll pay for this," he whispered. "Both of you." The truck tore down the back roads at 60 miles an hour, headlights cutting through the Georgia darkness. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, Shadow's head in her lap, her hands pressed against the wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. The dog's breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, and every few seconds a whimper escaped his throat. "Stay with me, boy," she whispered. "Please stay with me." Garrett kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He'd driven through ambushes in Kandahar that felt less tense than this. "How's he doing?" "Bad." Sarah's voice cracked. "He's losing too much blood. We need a vet. We need... I know someone. 20 minutes out." "He doesn't have 20 minutes." Garrett glanced at her, saw the terror in her eyes, saw the blood soaking through her shirt. "Then talk to him," he said quietly. "Keep him conscious. Dogs can hear your voice even when they're fading. Don't let him go." Sarah leaned down, pressing her forehead against Shadow's. "Hey, boy. Hey. You remember when we found each other? You were just a puppy. Dad wanted to drown you because you were the runt of the litter. But I hid you in my closet for 3 weeks. Remember, you slept in my sweater every night." Shadow's tail moved. Just barely. Just once. "That's it. That's my good boy. You saved me so many times. Now I'm going to save you. Okay, I promise. I promise I'm going to save you." Garrett's jaw tightened. He pushed the truck to 70. Victor Whitmore's study smelled like bourbon and rage. He sat behind his mahogany desk, an ice pack pressed against his swelling jaw, while Sheriff Porter and Deputy Mills stood at attention like soldiers awaiting orders. "Tell me you have something," Victor growled. Porter shifted his weight. "We put out a bolo on the truck. Black Ford F-150 older model. Georgia plates, but we didn't get the full number." "That's not good enough." "Sir, we're doing everything everything!" Victor slammed his fist on the desk. "A man assaulted the mayor of this city, kidnapped his daughter, and you're telling me you're doing everything?" "With respect, sir, we don't know that it was a kidnapping. Your daughter left willingly. We all saw..." "What you saw," Victor said slowly, "was a mentally unstable woman being manipulated by an armed predator. That's what you saw. That's what you'll tell the media. That's what you'll put in your report." Porter hesitated. "Dale." Victor's voice dropped to something almost gentle. "We've known each other a long time. I've been very good to you. Very generous. Now I need you to be good to me. Do you understand?" The sheriff swallowed. "Yes, sir." "Good. Now get out there and find my daughter. And when you find the man who took her..." Victor's eyes went cold. "Make sure he resists arrest." Porter nodded once and left. Deputy Mills lingered. Sir, what about Gareth Cole? Victor smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Mills had ever seen. Gareth is already on his way, Jambuan. Dr. Angela Reyes had been asleep for exactly 45 minutes when the pounding started. She grabbed her shotgun from beside the bed and padded to the door in her bathrobe, not bothering with the lights. At 62, she'd learned that unexpected visitors after midnight were rarely friendly. Who's there? Angela, it's Garrett Cross. I need your help. She lowered the shotgun. Garrett Cross. She hadn't heard that name in 3 years, not since the memorial service for his team in Arlington. She opened the door. Garrett stood on her porch covered in blood that wasn't his, carrying a German shepherd that looked more dead than alive. Behind him, a young woman with a split lip and terror in her eyes clutched the dog's paw like a lifeline. Head trauma, Garrett said. Blunt force. He's been unconscious for 12 minutes. Breathing is shallow. Pulse is thready. Angela didn't ask questions. Bring him in. Surgery room, second door on the left. She was already moving years of combat medicine training kicking in like muscle memory. She'd served 20 years as an Army vet before retiring to this quiet corner of Georgia. She'd thought her days of emergency surgery were over. Apparently not. You, she pointed at Sarah. Can you assist? I don't know how. Can you follow instructions and not faint? Sarah straightened. Yes. Then scrub in. Garrett, I need you on the monitors. Move. They moved. The surgery took 3 hours. Sarah stood beside the table the entire time, handing Angela instruments, holding retractors, doing whatever she was told. Her hands shook for the first hour. By the second, they were steady. Garrett watched from the monitors, tracking Shadow's vitals, calling out numbers, when they dropped breathing again, when they stabilized. Skull fracture, Angela muttered, extracting another shard of glass. He's lucky. 2 millimeters to the left, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Will he make it? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Too early to tell. The swelling is significant. Next 24 hours are critical. Angela glanced up at her. You did good keeping pressure on the wound. Probably saved his life. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Don't cry yet, Angela said. We're not done. Hand me the suture kit. At 4 a.m., Shadow was stable. He lay on a padded table in Angela's recovery room, his head wrapped in clean bandages, an IV drip feeding fluids into his system. His breathing had steadied. His heart rate was weak but consistent. Sarah sat beside him, holding his paw, refusing to let go. Garrett stood in the doorway, watching. She hasn't moved in 2 hours. Angela said quietly, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. Who is she? The mayor's daughter. Angela's expression didn't change. Victor Whitmore. You know him. I know of him. Everyone in 3 counties knows of him. She handed Garrett a cup. I also know the rumors. About his first wife. About his temper. About the emergency room visits that always got explained away. Garrett's jaw tightened. They're not rumors. No, I didn't think they were. Angela sipped her coffee. So, you rescued her. I intervened. Same thing. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. You know he'll come after you. Men like Victor Whitmore don't let things go. I know. And you did it anyway. Garrett watched Sarah lean down and whisper something to her dog, watched Shadow's tail twitch in response. Yeah, he said. I did. Dawn was breaking when Sarah finally spoke. You didn't have to do this. Garrett looked up from the chair where he'd been dozing. Sarah hadn't moved from Shadow's side, but her eyes were on him now, red-rimmed and exhausted. Do what? Save us. Risk everything. You don't even know me." Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I knew a dog once," he said finally. "Rex, Belgian Malinois, smartest animal I ever met. We did 6 tours together." Sarah waited. "Last mission we were clearing a compound in Helmand Province. Bad intel. The whole thing was a setup. Rex caught the tripwire before I did. Blocked me with his body." His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "I carried him 3 miles to the extraction point. Talked to him the whole way. Told him he was a good boy. Told him we were going home." Garrett's jaw tightened. "He died in my arms before the medevac landed." Sarah's breath caught. "I couldn't save him," Garrett said. "I've done a lot of things I'm proud of, and I've done things that wake me up at 3 a.m. But that I couldn't fix." He looked at Shadow, still breathing, still alive. "I wasn't going to let it happen again." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry about Rex." "I'm sorry about your father." She flinched. He wasn't always—" "Yes, he was." The words hung in the air, brutal and true. Sarah looked away. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen it before. Men like him don't become monsters. They always were. They just get better at hiding it." Garrett leaned forward. "How long, Sarah?" She didn't answer. "How long has he been hurting you? 16 years. The words came out barely audible. "Since I was 8. Since my mother died. Died or car accident." Sarah's voice was hollow. "That's what the report said. Single vehicle. Lost control on a wet road. But I was in the car, Garrett. I was in the back seat. And I remember her screaming at him on the phone right before it happened. I remember the way she said, 'I'm taking her and leaving.'" The silence that followed was deafening. "I've never told anyone that," Sarah whispered. I was 8. I thought maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was wrong, but I wasn't wrong. Was I?" Garrett's hands curled into fists. "No," he said quietly. "You weren't wrong." Gareth Cole arrived in Pinewood at 6 a.m. He was a small man with forgettable features, the kind of person you'd pass on the street and never remember. That was his greatest asset. People underestimated him, overlooked him, dismissed him. They usually regretted it. He met Victor at the estate, stepping over the dried blood on the patio without comment. "Tell me everything," Cole said. Victor told him. The party, the dog, the stranger who had appeared from nowhere and taken his daughter. Cole listened without expression. "The stranger," he said when Victor finished. "Describe him again." "Tall, dark hair, military bearing, moved like he knew what he was doing." "Did he speak?" "Barely. Said he was going to make sure everyone knew what I was." Victor's face contorted. "He hit me, Gareth, in my own home, in front of my guests. And your daughter left with him willingly. She was manipulated, coerced. She doesn't know what she's doing." Cole's eyes flickered. He'd worked for Victor long enough to know the truth when he heard it, and to recognize the lies. But Victor paid well. Very well. "I'll find them," Cole said. "The military bearing suggests a veteran. I'll run a check on recent arrivals in the area, cross-reference with rental properties. He can't have gotten far." "And when you find them," Cole's expression didn't change. "What would you like me to do?" Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I want him dead. I want it to look like self-defense. And I want my daughter back in this house by tomorrow night. That will cost extra. I don't care what it costs." Cole nodded once. "Consider it done." Angela's farmhouse had been off the grid for 15 years. No cell service, no internet, no visible address from the main road. It was the perfect place to hide, which was exactly why Garrett had chosen it. But he knew they couldn't stay forever. We need to move, he told Angela, while Sarah slept on the couch, Shadow's paw still in her hand. Victor Whitmore isn't going to stop looking. He has resources, connections. If he's smart, and he is, he'll hire professionals. Professionals like you, worse, the kind who don't have rules. Angela poured herself another coffee. So what's the plan? I have a contact, JAG officer in Washington. He owes me a favor. If I can get evidence of what Victor's been doing, medical records, testimony, documentation, we can take this federal, get it out of the local sheriff's hands. And in the meantime, we stay hidden, stay quiet, stay alive. Angela glanced at the sleeping girl. She trusts you. She doesn't know me. Doesn't matter. You're the first person who ever stood up for her. That means something. Angela set down her cup. I've seen a lot of broken people, Garrett. Combat veterans, abuse survivors, animals that have been tortured. Most of them, the light goes out and it never comes back. And her? Angela looked at Sarah, at the way her hand unconsciously stroked Shadow's fur, even in sleep. The light's still there, she said. Buried deep, but still there. Don't let them snuff it out. Garrett nodded. He didn't intend to. Sarah woke to the sound of Shadow whimpering. She jerked upright, heart pounding, and saw the dog's legs twitching, his bandaged head moving from side to side. Shadow, Shadow, it's okay. I'm here. I'm right here. His eyes opened. For a terrible moment, they were unfocused, glazed with pain and confusion. Sarah's throat closed up. Then Shadow saw her. His tail thumped against the table, weak, unsteady, but unmistakable. Oh, God! Sarah buried her face in his fur, sobbing. Oh, God, you're okay. You're okay. Garrett appeared in the doorway. He's awake. He's awake. He knows me. Sarah laughed through her tears. He's trying to lick my face. Angela pushed past Garrett, already checking the dog's vitals. Pupils are reactive. Heart rate's improving. This is remarkable. He's a fighter, Sarah said, stroking Shadow's ears. He's always been a fighter. The dog's tail thumped again, and for the first time in 16 years, Sarah felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The hope lasted exactly 3 hours. Garrett was checking the perimeter when he saw the dust cloud on the access road. He dropped into a crouch, watching through the tree line as a black SUV crept toward the farmhouse. No lights, no sirens. Moving slowly, deliberately, like a predator stalking prey. Damn it! He sprinted back to the house, bursting through the door. We have company. Angela's face went pale. How many? One vehicle? Maybe 2-3 men. Then Garrett was already moving, grabbing his bag, pulling out supplies. I need you to take Sarah and Shadow out the back. There's a creek bed that runs north, follow it for a mile, then cut east to the highway. I'll buy you time. I'm not leaving you, Sarah said. This isn't negotiable. I said no. She stood up, her chin raised, and for a moment Garrett saw someone entirely different from the terrified girl he'd rescued. I've spent my whole life running from my father, hiding, staying quiet. I'm done. Sarah, you're not doing this alone. Their eyes locked. Outside, a car door slammed. Fine, Garrett said. Angela, take Shadow. Hide in the cellar. Sarah, you stay behind me. You do exactly what I say. Understood? Sarah nodded. Angela scooped up Shadow, who whined in protest, and disappeared into the back of the house. Footsteps on the porch. Garrett positioned himself beside the door, back against the wall, every muscle coiled. The doorknob turned. The door swung open. And a young woman in a police uniform stepped inside. Don't shoot, she said, hands raised. I'm here to help. Officer Jenny Brooks was 26 years old and terrified out of her mind. But she didn't let it show. "I know who you are," she said to Garrett. "And I know who she is. I also know that Victor Whitmore just put a $75,000 bounty on your heads and told Sheriff Porter to shoot on sight." Garrett didn't lower his guard. "And why should I trust you?" "Because I've been documenting Victor's crimes for 2 years." Jenny reached slowly into her jacket and pulled out a USB drive. Medical records, witness statements, photos, everything I could gather without getting caught. Sarah stepped forward. "Why?" Jenny looked at her and something softened in her eyes. "Because my sister married a man like your father. She didn't make it out." She pressed the USB drive into Sarah's hand. "I wasn't going to let it happen to someone else." Garrett studied her for a long moment. "How did you find us?" "I followed Cole. He's good, but I'm better. He's about 10 minutes behind me." Jenny's voice hardened. "Which means you need to leave. Now. I can stall him, but not for long. Come with us." "I can't. If I disappear, they'll know something's wrong. But I can feed you information, run interference, keep you one step ahead." She handed Garrett a burner phone. "Memorize the number. Call only in emergencies." Garrett took the phone. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Really?" Jenny looked at Sarah, at the bruises on her arms, at the split lip that was just starting to heal. "Because someone should have done it a long time ago." She turned and walked out the door. 10 seconds later, her cruiser peeled away down the access road. Garrett looked at Angela, who had emerged from the cellar with Shadow in her arms. "Change of plans," he said. "We're leaving tonight. All of us." They were gone within the hour. Angela's old pickup truck rattled down back roads that didn't appear on any GPS. Shadow sedated and secure in a padded crate, Sarah clutching the USB drive like a talisman. Garrett drove. Behind them, Gareth Cole arrived at the empty farmhouse, found the still warm coffee cups, and smiled. "They're running," he said into his phone. "But they can't run forever." He stepped onto the porch and looked at the tire tracks leading into the darkness. "I'll find them," he said. "I always do." In the truck, Sarah stared at the road ahead. "Garrett, yeah. What happens if we can't stop him? My father, I mean. What happens if he wins?" Garrett glanced at her. "He won't." "How do you know?" "Because I've fought men like him my whole life. Tyrants, bullies, people who think power makes them untouchable." His hands tightened on the wheel. "They all fall eventually. Every single one." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I've never seen him scared before," she said finally. "Tonight when you hit him, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear." "Good." It felt, she struggled for the word. "It felt like something breaking, something that's been stuck inside me for 16 years. Garrett nodded. "That's called hope," he said. "Hold on to it." Sarah looked out the window at the darkness rushing past. For the first time in her life, she thought she might actually have a future, and she was going to fight for it. 3 days in the mountains had changed Sarah in ways she didn't fully understand. She woke before dawn, now not from fear, but from habit. She helped Angela with the cooking, learned to chop wood, discovered that her hands could create warmth, instead of just cleaning up the messes her father made. Shadow was healing faster than anyone expected, already limping around the cabin, his tail wagging whenever Sarah came into view. But Garrett knew they were running out of time. "We can't stay here forever," he said on the 3rd morning, standing by the window with a cup of coffee gone cold. "Cole is good. Eventually he'll find us." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. She was sitting on the floor beside Shadow, brushing his coat with gentle strokes. "We go on offense." Garrett turned to face her. "Jenny's USB drive has evidence, but it's not enough. We need your testimony. On video, in your own words. Sarah's hand stopped moving. You want me to tell everyone what he did? I want you to tell the truth. There's a journalist in Atlanta, Marcus James. He's taken down corrupt politicians before. If we can get your story to him, get it out there before your father can spin it, we change the narrative. And if it doesn't work, then at least we tried. Sarah looked down at Shadow, at the scar forming on his skull, at the dog, who had almost died protecting her. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. They set up the camera in the main room, positioning Sarah on a wooden chair with Shadow at her feet. Angela handled the equipment while Garrett stood behind the lens watching. Just talk, he said. Pretend it's just us. Tell the truth. Sarah took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. My name is Sarah Whitmore. My father is Mayor Victor Whitmore of Pinewood, Georgia, and for 16 years he has been beating me. She paused, gathering herself. It started after my mother died. I was 8 years old. The first time he hit me, it was because I cried at her funeral. He said Whitmores don't show weakness. He said I was embarrassing him. Shadow pressed closer against her leg, sensing her distress. After that, it was constant. If dinner was late, he hit me. If his shirt wasn't ironed properly, he hit me. If I looked at him the wrong way, he hit me. I learned to be invisible. I learned to be silent. I learned that surviving meant never ever fighting back. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. He killed my dog because Shadow tried to protect me. He smashed a bottle over his head and laughed while he bled. And if Garrett hadn't been there, if he hadn't stopped my father... Her voice broke. I don't think I would have survived that night. She looked directly into the camera. My father is a monster. He wears a nice suit and shakes hands and smiles for the cameras, but behind closed doors, he is a monster. And I am done being afraid of him. Garrett hit the stop button. Sarah collapsed forward, sobbing. Angela moved to comfort her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, murmuring soft words. Garrett watched for a moment, then turned away. He had work to do. The upload took forever on the satellite connection. Garrett paced while the progress bar crawled forward. 10%, 20, 30. Every second felt like an eternity. How long? Angela asked. Too long. If Cole is tracking satellite signals, he'll pick this up. Then we should abort. We're past the point of no return. Garrett checked his phone, still no signal. This video goes out or everything we've done is for nothing. 40%, 50. Sarah appeared in this doorway, Shadow limping beside her. Her eyes were red, but her chin was raised. It's going to work, she said. It has to. 60%, 70. Garrett's instincts were screaming at him. Something was wrong. Something was coming. 80%. Shadow's head snapped up. The dog stared at the door hackles, rising a low growl building in his throat. Company, Garrett said. 90%. Everyone down, now. They dropped to the floor just as the first bullet punched through the window. Glass exploded inward. Sarah screamed, throwing herself over Shadow, shielding him with her body. Angela crawled toward the back room, moving with the efficiency of someone who had survived combat before. Garrett was already moving. He grabbed the shotgun from beside the fireplace and pressed himself against the wall, counting shots, calculating positions. 3 shooters, maybe 4. Spread out, professional. Cole hadn't just found them. He'd brought an army. Sarah, Garrett shouted. Crawl to the cellar. Don't stand up. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you. This isn't negotiable. Go! Another burst of gunfire. Splinters flew from the doorframe. Sarah grabbed Shadow's collar and started pulling him toward the back of the cabin. The dog fought her, trying to get back to Garrett, but she held on. "Come on, boy. Please, please come with me." They disappeared into the darkness. Garrett took a breath. Then he stepped into the doorway and fired. The first shooter went down with a shout. Garrett didn't wait to see if he was dead. He rolled behind the woodpile, chambered another round, and fired again. The second shooter dove for cover, returning fire that tore chunks out of the logs above Garrett's head. "Cross!" a voice shouted from the darkness. "Garrett, cross! I know who you are. I know what you did. Victor Whitmore sends his regards." Gareth Cole. "Tell Victor he can go to hell," Garrett shouted back. "He already has, and he's taking everyone with him." Footsteps to the left. Garrett spun and fired. A grunt of pain told him he'd hit something. "You're outnumbered, Cross. 4 against 1. Give us the girl, and maybe you walk away." "Not happening." "Then you die here." More gunfire. Garrett felt a bullet tear through the sleeve of his jacket, missing his arm by millimeters. He pressed himself flat against the ground, heart pounding. He was running out of ammunition. He was running out of options. Then he heard Shadow bark. Not from the cellar. From behind the shooters. Sarah had gone out the back. She didn't know what she was doing. She only knew that she wasn't going to hide in a cellar, while the only person who had ever protected her died on her behalf. Shadow understood. The dog moved like a ghost through the darkness, his injured hip forgotten, his predator instincts fully engaged. Sarah followed, staying low, staying quiet, using everything Garrett had taught her in the past 3 days. They circled around the cabin, coming up behind the shooters. Sarah saw 3 men. One was down, groaning. 2 were focused on the front of the cabin, firing at regular intervals. And a 4th man stood apart, watching. Gareth Cole. He had a phone to his ear, speaking in a low voice. "Yes, sir. We have them pinned. It's just a matter of time." Shadow growled. Cole turned. His eyes widened. "What the—" Shadow launched. 60 pounds of German Shepherd hit Cole like a missile, teeth, snapping claws, raking. Cole screamed and went down, his phone flying into the darkness. The 2 remaining shooters spun around. Garrett exploded from cover. He crossed the distance in 3 seconds, hitting the first shooter with a tackle that sent them both crashing to the ground. A quick blow to the temple, and the man went limp. The second shooter tried to bring his weapon around, but Sarah was there. She swung a piece of firewood with everything she had. It connected with the side of his head. He dropped. Sarah stood over him, breathing hard, the wood still clutched in her trembling hands. "That was for Shadow," she whispered. Garrett zip-tied the survivors while Sarah pulled Shadow off of Cole. The small man was bleeding from a dozen wounds, whimpering on the ground, all his menace stripped away. "Please," Cole gasped. "Please don't kill me." Garrett crouched beside him. "I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to give you a message for your boss." He leaned in close. "Tell Victor that this is over. Tell him that his daughter is free. And tell him that if he sends anyone else after us, I won't be so merciful." He stood up. "Sarah, check the upload." She ran back to the cabin. The computer was on the floor, cracked, but still functioning. The screen showed a single word, "sent." "It's done," she called out. "It went through." Garrett allowed himself a single exhale of relief. Then sirens erupted in the distance. Jenny Brooks had kept her promise. She'd been monitoring police channels, waiting for any sign of Cole's team. When the satellite trace came through, she'd acted immediately, not sending Victor's men, but the state police. 3 cruisers arrived at the cabin within 20 minutes. Garrett surrendered his weapon immediately, hands raised, keeping his movements slow and visible. The state troopers were professionals. They secured the scene, called for ambulances, and took statements without assuming anyone was guilty. "You're Garrett Cross, the lead trooper." A woman in her 40s with steel gray hair looked at him with something like respect. "The Navy SEAL. Former. We got a call from someone in the FBI. Said you might be in trouble. Said we should get here before the local sheriff." Garrett glanced at the road where Sheriff Porter's cruiser was just pulling up. "Good timing." The trooper followed his gaze. "Yeah, I'd say so." Sheriff Porter was furious. "This is my jurisdiction," he shouted at the state trooper. "These people are wanted for kidnapping and assault." "These people are under federal protection," the trooper replied calmly. "There's a warrant for Victor Whitmore's arrest coming through as we speak. If I were you, Sheriff, I'd start thinking about which side of this you want to be on." Porter's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "투음심." "Really? Because we've got testimony from 4 men who say they were hired by Victor Whitmore to kidnap his daughter and kill a decorated Navy veteran." The trooper stepped closer. "And we've got a video that's currently going viral. 20 million views in the last 2 hours. The whole country is watching." Porter's hand drifted toward his gun. Garrett tensed. "Don't," the trooper said quietly. "Just don't." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Porter's shoulders slumped. "I want a lawyer," he said. "You'll need one." Sarah watched them put Porter in handcuffs. She couldn't believe it. The man who had looked the other way for 16 years, who had covered up her father's crimes, who had smiled at her at charity events while knowing exactly what was happening behind closed doors, he was finally facing consequences. "It's really happening," she whispered. Garrett stood beside her, one arm in a sling from a bullet graze he'd refused to let Angela treat until everyone else was secured. "It's really happening." "What about my father?" "They're on their way to arrest him now. FBI took the lead. Your video gave them probable cause." Sarah's legs suddenly felt weak. She sat down on the porch steps, Shadow immediately pressing against her side. 16 years, she said. 16 years of hiding, of being afraid, of thinking no one would ever believe me. They believe you now. Because of you. She looked up at him. You believed me first. Garrett sat down beside her. I just saw what everyone else refused to see. That's not nothing, that's everything. They sat in silence as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. For the first time in her life, Sarah watched a sunrise without fear. Victor Whitmore heard the sirens from his study. He'd been drinking since dawn, watching Sarah's video play on loop, reading the comments that piled up by the thousands. Murderer, monster, abuser. The words blurred together after a while. His phone had been ringing non-stop. Calls from lawyers, from political allies, from reporters demanding statements. He'd stopped answering hours ago. Now the sirens were getting closer. He stood up slowly, walked to his desk, and opened the bottom drawer. The gun was there exactly where he'd left it. He picked it up, felt its familiar weight in his hand. The front door burst open. FBI Victor Whitmore, you're under arrest. Victor turned the gun raised. Don't do it, an agent shouted. Put the weapon down. For a moment, Victor considered it, ending things on his own terms, denying them the satisfaction. But then he thought about Sarah, about the look on her face when she realized he was gone. And he realized that even in death he wanted to hurt her one last time. He dropped the gun. You're making a mistake, he said as they cuffed him. I'm the mayor of this city. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, the agent replied. I suggest you use it. They led him out the front door past the cameras that had gathered past the neighbors, who watched with expressions of shock and satisfaction. Victor Whitmore's reign was over. The news spread like wildfire. Marcus James' article hit the front page of every major news outlet within hours. Mayor arrested for domestic abuse. Daughter's viral video sparks FBI investigation. The story had everything: a corrupt politician, a brave survivor, a heroic veteran, a loyal dog. It was the kind of story that captured the nation's attention. Sarah watched the coverage from Angela's cabin wrapped in a blanket, Shadow's head in her lap. "They're calling you a hero," Angela said. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who finally told the truth." "That's the same thing sometimes." Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at it expecting another reporter, another request for an interview. It was Jenny Brooks. "They got him," Jenny said. "Victor's in federal custody, no bail. They're charging him with assault witness tampering, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder." Sarah's breath caught. "Murder?" "Your mother, Sarah. They're reopening the investigation." The world tilted. "I have to go," Sarah whispered. She hung up and stared at the phone in her hand. 16 years. 16 years of wondering if she'd imagined it, of telling herself that accidents happen, of pushing down the memory of her mother's scream, the sound of the phone, the words she'd heard through the fog of childhood. "Sarah," Garrett's voice came from the doorway. "What is it?" "They're investigating my mother's death." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "They believe me. They finally believe me." Garrett crossed the room and sat beside her. She leaned into him, and for a long time they just sat there together, while Shadow pressed close, and the sun moved across the sky. That night Sarah dreamed of her mother. Not the accident, not the funeral, not the years of silence that followed. She dreamed of before, of being 7 years old, sitting on her mother's lap, listening to her sing, of warm hands braiding her hair, of being told that she was loved, that she was wanted, that she was enough. "You're going to be okay, baby," her mother said in the dream. "You're going to be so much more than okay." Sarah woke up crying. But they were different tears. They were the tears of someone who was finally beginning to heal. Shadow was there, his wet nose pressing against her cheek, his tail thumping softly in the darkness. "I know, boy," she whispered. "I know. We made it." He licked her face. And for the first time in 16 years, Sarah Whitmore smiled in the dark. But the fight wasn't over yet. 3 days later, Sarah received a letter. It was handwritten on official letterhead from the Federal Detention Center. She recognized the handwriting immediately, the sharp, aggressive strokes, the way certain letters were pressed so hard they tore the paper. Victor. She almost threw it away without reading it. But something made her stop. Something made her need to know what he had to say. She opened the envelope. "Sarah, you think you've won. You haven't. I built this family. I built this name. And I will destroy you before I let you take it from me. You were nothing before me. You'll be nothing after. That dog should have died, and so should you. This isn't over. Your father." Sarah's hands were shaking. Garrett found her on the porch, staring at the letter Shadow pressed against her legs. "What is it?" She handed it to him without a word. Garrett read it, his expression hardening with each line. "He's trying to scare you. It's working." "No." Garrett crumpled the letter and threw it away. "It's not. Because you're not the same person you were a week ago. You're not the girl who flinched at his voice and hid bruises under long sleeves. You're someone who stood up, who fought back, who told the truth when no one else would." He took her hands in his. "He can't hurt you anymore, Sarah. Not unless you let him." Sarah looked at Shadow, at the scar on his head, at the way he watched her with absolute trust. "You're right," she said quietly. "He can't." She took a deep breath. "I want to testify. At his trial. I want to look him in the eyes and tell the world what he did." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Garrett nodded. "Then we'll make it happen." Across the state, in a maximum security holding cell, Victor Whitmore stared at the ceiling. He was already planning his next move. The trial would be his stage, his opportunity to show the world that Sarah was unstable, that the veteran had manipulated her, that everything was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. He still had allies. He still had resources. And he still had one card left to play. Victor smiled in the darkness. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The federal courthouse in Atlanta was a fortress of marble and judgment. Sarah stood at the bottom of the steps, Shadow pressed against her leg, staring up at the building where her father's fate would be decided. Her hands were trembling, but she forced them to stay at her sides. "You don't have to do this," Garrett said beside her. "The video testimony is enough." The prosecution said, "I know what they said." Sarah took a breath. "But he needs to see my face. He needs to know I'm not afraid of him anymore." "Are you afraid?" Sarah thought about it. "Terrified," she admitted. "But I'm going anyway." Garrett nodded. There was pride in his eyes. "Then let's go." They walked up the steps together, Shadow limping slightly but keeping pace. The scar on his head had healed into a jagged white line against his black fur, a permanent reminder of the night everything changed. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions, cameras flashing. Sarah kept her head down and pushed through. She'd given enough interviews. Today was about something else. Today was about ending it. Victor Whitmore looked smaller in an orange jumpsuit. That was Sarah's first thought when she saw him at the defense table. He'd lost weight. His hair had gone grayer. The arrogant posture she remembered had curved into something defensive, hunched. But his eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. Full of hatred. He turned as she entered the courtroom, and for one terrible moment their gazes locked. Sarah's heart stuttered. Then Shadow growled. The low rumbling sound cut through the silence, and Victor flinched. Actually flinched like a man who had finally learned what it meant to be afraid. Sarah felt something shift inside her. She walked to the witness stand, with her head held high. The prosecutor was a woman named Diana Chen, sharp, featured, and relentless. "Ms. Whitmore, can you describe the first time your father hit you?" Sarah gripped the armrest of the witness chair. "I was 8 years old. My mother had just died. At the funeral I started crying, and my father grabbed my arm and pulled me into the bathroom. He said, 'Whitmores don't show weakness in public.' Then he slapped me across the face." "And how often did the abuse occur after that?" "Almost every day. Sometimes multiple times a day. It depended on his mood, how much he'd been drinking, whether something had gone wrong at work." "Did anyone know, teachers, neighbors, other family members?" "People knew." Sarah's voice hardened. "They just didn't care. My father was the mayor. He gave money to the schools, hosted charity events, shook hands with everyone who mattered. Nobody wanted to believe he was capable of what he did behind closed doors." "Objection." Victor's lawyer stood up. "The witness is speculating about what others knew or believed." "Sustained. Ms. Whitmore, please limit your answers to what you directly witnessed." Sarah nodded. "I understand." But she'd made her point. The cross-examination was brutal. Victor's lawyer was a man named Harrison Croft, expensive suit, silver tongue, the kind of attorney who made his living defending the indefensible. Ms. Whitmore, you lived in your father's house for 24 years. Is that correct? Yes. And during that time you had access to phones, to computers, to people outside the household. Yes, but... So you could have called the police at any time. You could have gone to a teacher, a doctor, a neighbor, but you didn't. Sarah's jaw tightened. You don't understand what it's like. Help me understand then. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a young woman who lived a privileged life, who had every advantage, who suddenly decided to accuse her father of terrible crimes only after she met a stranger who convinced her to run away. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Croft moved closer. Garrett Cross is a decorated veteran, yes, but he's also a man with documented PTSD. A man who was discharged after a mission failure. A man who, by his own admission, struggles to reintegrate into civilian life. Is it possible, Ms. Whitmore, that he saw in you someone he could save? That he projected his own trauma onto your situation and convinced you that you were a victim when you were simply unhappy? Objection. Diana Chen stood. Counsel is badgering the witness. I'll rephrase. Croft's smile was thin. Ms. Whitmore, prior to meeting Garrett Cross, had you ever attempted to leave your father's home? Sarah hesitated. No. Had you ever filed a police report? No. Had you ever told anyone at all, that you were being abused? The word caught in Sarah's throat. No. Croft turned to the jury. No further questions. Sarah stepped down from the stand with her legs shaking. She hadn't realized how hard it would be to explain the unexplainable. How do you describe the way fear becomes normal? The way you stop seeing escape routes because you've been convinced there aren't any. The way a prison can be a mansion, and your jailer can be your own father. Garrett was waiting for her in the hallway. You did good, he said quietly. I froze. He made me look like a liar. He made you look human. There's a difference. Garrett handed her a bottle of water. The jury saw your father flinch when Shadow growled. They saw the way he looked at you. That's worth more than any lawyer's speech. Sarah took a shaky breath. I hope you're right. I'm always right. She almost smiled. Almost. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, Sarah sat in the gallery with Shadow at her feet, watching as witness after witness took the stand. Angela testified about Shadow's injuries, about the surgery, about the terror in Sarah's eyes when she first arrived at the farmhouse. Jenny Brooks testified about the years she'd spent gathering evidence about the sheriff's complicity, about the conspiracy of silence that had protected Victor Whitmore. And then came the surprise witness. The prosecution calls Diane Whitmore. Sarah's stepmother walked into the courtroom with her head bowed and her hands clasped in front of her. She looked like she'd aged 20 years in 3 weeks. Sarah hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected Diane to say anything. Diane's voice was barely audible as she was sworn in. Mrs. Whitmore. Diana Chen said gently. Can you describe your relationship with your husband? Diane's hands trembled. Victor was charming. When I met him, he was everything I thought I wanted. Powerful, successful, confident. He made me feel special. When did that change? About 6 months after we got married. Diane's voice cracked. He started drinking more, getting angry over little things. I told myself it was stress, that being mayor was hard, that he would go back to the man I fell in love with. Did he? No. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He got worse. And then I started noticing things about Sarah. The way she flinched when he raised his voice. The bruises she tried to hide. The long sleeves in summer. Did you confront your husband about this? Diane was silent for a long moment. Once, just once. He told me that if I ever mentioned it again, I would end up like his first wife. She looked at Sarah, her eyes full of guilt and sorrow. I was a coward. I knew what he was doing and I said nothing. I let that girl suffer because I was too afraid to act. Objection, Croft said, but his voice lacked conviction. Move to strike. Overruled. The judge's face was grim. Continue, Mrs. Whitmore. I don't have anything else to say. Diane wiped her eyes. Except that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She looked at Sarah again, and for the first time, Sarah saw something other than an enemy. She saw another victim. The defense called Victor Whitmore to the stand. It was a gamble. Everyone knew it was a gamble, but Victor had insisted. He needed to tell his side of the story. He needed the jury to see him as a human being, not a monster. He walked to the witness stand with the swagger of a man who still believed he could talk his way out of anything. Mr. Whitmore, Croft began, you've heard a lot of accusations over the past 3 weeks. What would you like to say to the jury? Victor straightened his shoulders. I loved my daughter, he said. Everything I did for her. Was I strict? Yes. Was I demanding? Absolutely. But that's what fathers are supposed to be. We're supposed to prepare our children for a harsh world. We're supposed to teach them discipline. And the physical abuse your daughter described, exaggerated. Victor's voice was smooth, practiced. Sarah was always emotional, always dramatic. She took ordinary discipline and turned it into something it wasn't. What about the dog Shadow? Victor's eye twitched. The animal attacked me. I defended myself. Any reasonable person would have done the same. Diana Chen stood for cross-examination. Mr. Whitmore, you claim you never abused your daughter. Is that correct? That's correct. Then can you explain these? She held up a stack of photographs. Medical records from Pinewood General Hospital. 7 different visits over 12 years. Broken arm age 10. Cracked ribs age 14. Concussion age 17. All attributed to household accidents. Victor's composure flickered. Children get hurt. It happens. Every time the treating physician noted inconsistencies between the injury and the explanation given. Every time they filed a report with Child Protective Services. And every time those reports were buried. Diana Chen stepped closer. Would it surprise you to learn that Sheriff Porter has testified that you personally asked him to make those reports disappear? Porter is a liar. Is he? What about Deputy Mills, who testified to the same thing? What about your own wife, who just told this courtroom that you threatened to kill her if she spoke up? Victor's face was turning red. They're all lying. Everyone is lying. This is a conspiracy to destroy me. A conspiracy. Diana's voice dripped with contempt. Mr. Whitmore, I have one final question. On the night of July 4th, did you strike your daughter in the face hard enough to split her lip? Did you? She was being disrespectful. She embarrassed me in front of my guests. Answer the question, did you hit her? Victor's mask cracked. Yes, he shouted. Yes, I hit her. Because she needed it. Because she's always needed it. Because her mother coddled her and ruined her, and I had to fix what that woman broke. The courtroom went silent. Victor realized what he'd said a second too late. His face drained of color. No further questions, Diana said quietly. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Sarah sat in the hallway with Garrett and Shadow waiting. Every minute felt like an eternity. What if they don't believe me? She whispered. They believe you. But what if, Sarah? Garrett took her hand. Whatever happens in there, you already won. You told the truth. You stood up. You showed millions of people that it's possible to break free. That matters. That will always matter. Sarah squeezed his hand. The door opened. The jury has reached a verdict. They filed back into the courtroom, Sarah's heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The judge turned to the jury foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of assault in the first degree, how do you find guilty? On the charge of witness tampering, how do you find guilty? On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty. On the charge of second-degree murder in the death of Margaret Whitmore. The foreman paused. Sarah stopped breathing. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Victor was on his feet, shouting as the bailiffs moved to restrain him. This is a travesty, a conspiracy. Sarah! Sarah, look at me. Look what you've done. But Sarah didn't look. She was crying too hard to see anything. Garrett pulled her into his arms, and Shadow pressed against her legs, and somewhere in the chaos she heard the judge's voice cutting through the noise. Order, order in the court! The gavel slammed down. Victor Whitmore, you are hereby remanded to custody pending sentencing. This court is adjourned. They walked out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun. The reporters were waiting, cameras flashing, questions flying. But Sarah didn't stop. She walked straight through the crowd, Garrett on one side, Shadow on the other, until they reached the car waiting at the curb. She climbed in and closed the door. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at her hands. It's over, she whispered. It's over. He killed my mother. The words came out broken, jagged. I always knew, but hearing it officially from a jury, he killed her. And he spent 16 years making me think I was crazy for suspecting it. Garrett didn't try to fix it. He just sat beside her, a solid presence in the chaos. What do you want to do now? He asked finally. Sarah looked out the window at the courthouse, at the place where her father's empire had finally crumbled. I want to go home, she said. Where's home? She thought about the mansion in Pinewood with its iron gates and heavy oak doors and 16 years of nightmares. She thought about Angela's farmhouse, where she'd learned to start fires and chop wood and believe in kindness again. She thought about the mountains, the quiet, the peace. I don't know yet, she said, but I'm going to find out. 2 weeks later, Victor Whitmore was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. Sarah watched the sentencing on television from Angela's living room, Shadow curled at her feet. She'd chosen not to attend. She'd seen enough of her father's face to last a lifetime. The court has considered the severity of your crimes, the judge said. The abuse of your position, the suffering you inflicted on your own daughter, and the murder of your first wife. There can be no leniency for such acts. Victor stood motionless, his face blank. You will serve your sentence at a maximum security facility with no possibility of parole for 20 years. May God have mercy on your soul. The gavel fell. Sarah turned off the television. How do you feel? Angela asked from the doorway. Sarah considered the question. Empty, she said finally. I thought I'd feel happy, or relieved, or something. But I just feel empty. That's normal. Justice doesn't erase the pain. It just gives you permission to start healing. Sarah looked down at Shadow, at the scar on his head, at the way his tail thumped against the floor when he caught her eye. I think I want to help other people, she said slowly. Other survivors. People who feel trapped like I did. People who think no one will believe them. That's a beautiful idea. I don't know how to do it. I don't have any training or experience, or you have your story. Angela sat down beside her. That's worth more than any degree. Sarah stroked Shadow's ears, thinking. Garrett taught me something, she said. He said that the mission of protection never ends. It just changes form. He's a smart man. He is. Sarah smiled slightly. Don't tell him I said that. Angela laughed. For the first time in weeks, Sarah laughed too. That night, Garrett found Sarah on the porch, looking up at the stars. He sat down beside her without speaking. I've been thinking, she said finally. Dangerous habit. I want to use my father's money, the inheritance. I want to do something good with it. Like what? A sanctuary. For animals, for people. A place where broken things can heal. She looked at him. Will you help me? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure I know how to build things, he said. I spent my whole life learning how to destroy them. Maybe it's time to learn something new. He looked at her, at the woman who had survived the unsurvivable, who had found her voice after 16 years of silence, who had turned her pain into purpose. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe it is. Sarah reached out and took his hand. They sat together as the stars wheeled overhead, Shadow sleeping at their feet. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt like something to look forward to some. Across the state, in a maximum security cell, Victor Whitmore lay on his cot and stared at the ceiling. He had lost everything. His power, his reputation, his freedom. But he could still hurt her. He closed his eyes and began to plan. 6 months changed everything. Sarah stood at the entrance of what used to be the abandoned Miller farm, watching volunteers carry supplies into the newly renovated barn. The property had been transformed from a forgotten ruin into something alive, something hopeful. Fresh white paint gleamed on the farmhouse. The fences had been mended, and above the main gate, a hand-carved wooden sign swung gently in the autumn breeze. Shadow's Hope Rescue Center. You're smiling, Garrett said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. I'm allowed to smile. Didn't say you weren't, just pointing out that it looks good on you. Sarah took the coffee, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. Shadow trotted up behind Garrett, his tail wagging his limp barely noticeable anymore. The scar on his head had faded to a thin white line against his dark fur. The volunteers are asking when you're going to give the speech, Garrett said. Speech, grand opening, ribbon cutting, inspirational words for the masses. He gestured toward the crowd gathering near the barn. They didn't come all this way to hear me talk. When Sarah's stomach tightened. I'm not good at speeches. You testified in front of a federal jury. You can handle a crowd of dog lovers. That was different. How? She thought about it. I was angry then. Anger makes things easier. So find something else. Garrett's voice softened. What do you feel now, Sarah? Right now, looking at all of this. She looked at the farm, at the volunteers, the rescued animals, the buildings that would shelter broken creatures until they found their way home. Grateful, she said quietly. Scared, proud, hopeful. Then say that. The crowd was bigger than Sarah expected. Angela was there, of course, grumbling about the cold, but beaming with pride. Jenny Brooks had driven up from Pinewood with her husband, her detective badge gleaming on her belt. Marcus James, the journalist who had broken the story, was taking photographs near the barn. Dr. Angela Reyes stood near the medical wing she'd helped design, already talking to potential donors about funding. And there were others, strangers, who had seen the news coverage, survivors, who had reached out after watching Sarah's testimony, families who simply wanted to support something good. Sarah walked to the small wooden podium someone had set up near the entrance. Shadow followed, settling at her feet with a contented sigh. Thank you all for coming. She began, her voice steadier than she expected. 6 months ago, I didn't think I'd be standing here. 6 months ago, I didn't think I'd be standing anywhere. She paused, gathering her thoughts. My father was a powerful man. He controlled a town, a sheriff's office, a court system. He controlled me for 16 years. And for most of that time, I believed I deserved it. I believed I was the problem. I believed that if I just tried harder, worked faster, stayed quieter, things would get better. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. They never did, because abuse isn't about what you do or don't do. It's about control. It's about making someone feel so small, so worthless, so trapped that they forget they ever had the right to be free. She looked down at Shadow. This dog saved my life. Not because he fought my father, though he did that too, but because he showed me what love looks like. Real love. The kind that protects without asking for anything in return. Shadow's tail thumped against the ground. So I built this place for him, and for every animal who needs a second chance, and for every person who has ever felt like I felt alone, afraid, invisible. Sarah raised her chin. You're not invisible. You matter. And somewhere someone is ready to fight for you. You just have to hold on long enough to find them. The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. Sarah wiped her eyes and stepped back from the podium. Garrett was waiting. How'd I do? Terrible, he said. Absolutely terrible. Then he pulled her into a hug, and she laughed against his chest. The celebration lasted until sunset. Sarah moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, listening to stories from survivors who had found strength in her testimony. Each conversation drained her a little more, but she kept going. These people had traveled hours to be here. The least she could do was give them her time. Ms. Whitmore. She turned to find a young woman standing behind her. Early 20s, dark hair, nervous hands. Yes. My name is Rachel. I saw your interview, the one Marcus James did after the trial. I remember. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. My stepfather, she whispered. For 8 years, I never told anyone because I thought no one would believe me. Sarah's heart clenched. I believe you. I know. That's why I came. Rachel took a shaky breath. I reported him last week. The police are investigating. My mom doesn't believe me, but I don't care anymore, because you showed me that the truth matters even when it hurts. Sarah reached out and took the young woman's hands. You're brave. I'm terrified. That's the same thing sometimes. Rachel laughed through her tears. Can I volunteer here? I don't know anything about animals, but I want to help. I want to do something. You already did something. You told the truth. Sarah squeezed her hands. But yes, we always need volunteers. Rachel hugged her hard and fast, then disappeared into the crowd. Sarah stood still for a moment, processing. This was why she'd built this place. This was why everything had happened. That night, after the last volunteer had gone home, Sarah sat on the porch of the farmhouse with Garrett. The sky was clear, the stars impossibly bright without the light pollution of the city. Shadow lay between them, snoring softly, his paws twitching as he chased something in his dreams. Hell of a day, Garrett said. Hell of a year. Getting philosophical. Maybe. Sarah pulled her knees up to her chest. Do you ever think about fate? Like whether things happen for a reason? I used to think that was nonsense. Random chance chaos theory, the universe doesn't care. And now, Garrett was quiet for a moment. Now I think, maybe there's a pattern. Not a plan exactly, but a pattern. People who need each other find each other. That's not nothing. Is that what happened to us? I think so. He looked at her, his eyes soft in the starlight. I was in a bad place when I came to Pinewood. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop replaying the mission that went wrong. Couldn't figure out why I survived when better men didn't. And then you heard my father screaming at me. And then I heard your father screaming at you. Garrett's jaw tightened. And suddenly I had a purpose again. Something worth fighting for. Sarah reached out and took his hand. I'm glad you were there. I'm glad you let me help. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. What happens now? Sarah asked finally. Now we keep going. We help who we can. We build something worth building. Together. Garrett squeezed her hand. Together. The phone rang at 3 a.m. Sarah jolted awake, heart-pounding old instincts screaming that something was wrong. She grabbed the phone and answered without checking the caller ID. Hello? Ms. Whitmore, this is Agent Davis with the FBI. Her blood went cold. What's wrong? I'm calling to inform you that Victor Whitmore died approximately 2 hours ago. The words didn't compute. What? He was found unresponsive in his cell. Preliminary indications suggest a heart attack, but we're conducting a full investigation. The agent's voice was clinical detached. I wanted you to hear it from us before the media gets hold of the story. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, unable to speak. Ms. Whitmore, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I understand this is difficult news. There are victims' services available if you need support. I can provide you with resources. That won't be necessary. Sarah's voice sounded strange in her own ears. Thank you for letting me know. She hung up. Garrett appeared in the doorway, alert and tense. What is it? My father is dead. The words hung in the air between them. How? Heart attack in his cell. Garrett crossed the room and sat beside her. How do you feel? Sarah tried to identify the emotions swirling through her chest. Grief? No, not quite. Relief, maybe. But something else, too. Something she couldn't name. I thought I'd feel free, she whispered. I thought when he was finally gone, really gone, I'd feel like the weight was lifted. And I feel sad. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Isn't that ridiculous? After everything he did, I feel sad. It's not ridiculous. He was your father. Whatever else he was that too. He killed my mother. He beat me for 16 years. He tried to have you murdered. I know. So why do I feel like this? Garrett pulled her into his arms. Because you're human, Sarah. Because you have a heart that knows how to love even when it shouldn't. That's not a weakness. That's what makes you strong. She cried against his chest until the tears ran out. Shadow climbed onto the bed and pressed against her back a warm, solid presence in the darkness. And slowly, gradually, the weight began to lift. The news broke at dawn. Corrupt mayor dies in prison abuse. Survivor speaks out. Sarah's phone exploded with calls, texts, interview requests. She turned it off and went for a walk with Shadow instead. The farm was quiet in the early morning, the rescued animals still sleeping, the volunteers not yet arrived. She walked the perimeter of the property, Shadow trotting beside her, and tried to make sense of what she was feeling. Her father was gone. The man who had cast a shadow over her entire life was simply gone. She should feel relieved. She should feel vindicated. She should feel something clean and simple. Instead, she felt everything at once. You know what the worst part is, she said to Shadow. The dog looked up at her ears, perked. Part of me still wanted him to apologize, even after everything. Part of me wanted him to look me in the eyes and say he was sorry. She laughed bitterly. How pathetic is that? Shadow whined and pushed his head against her leg. I know. You're right. It doesn't matter anymore. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around his neck. We made it, boy. We actually made it. Shadow's tail wagged, and Sarah realized something important. She hadn't needed her father's apology. She hadn't needed his permission to be free. She was free because she had chosen to be free, because she had stood up and told the truth, because she had refused to stay silent any longer. Victor Whitmore's death didn't give her closure. Her own courage did. 1 year after the trial, Sarah stood in front of the expanded Shadows Hope Rescue Center. The original farmhouse had grown into a campus. There was a medical clinic for injured animals, a training facility for therapy dogs, a counseling center for abuse survivors, and housing for women and children fleeing dangerous situations. Over 300 animals had been rescued and rehomed. Over 1,000 survivors had received support. And it was still growing. You've built something remarkable. Marcus James set his notebook open pen ready. He was writing a follow-up story on the anniversary of Victor Whitmore's conviction. I didn't build it alone. No, but you're the heart of it. He gestured at the volunteers moving through the grounds, at the animals playing in the exercise yard, at the families arriving for the anniversary celebration. All of this exists because you had the courage to speak up. Sarah looked at Shadow, gray-muzzled, now moving a little slower, but still watching her with those amber eyes full of devotion. He's the heart of it, she said. I'm just the voice. The anniversary celebration was quieter than the grand opening. Fewer reporters, fewer strangers. More of the people who had become family over the past year. Angela still grumbling, still fierce. Jenny Brooks, now chief of police in a different county, still fighting corruption wherever she found it. The volunteers who showed up week after week, caring for animals and humans with equal dedication. And Garrett, always Garrett. He found her near the memorial garden they'd built for animals, who had passed through the center and didn't make it. There was a new stone there, freshly placed. Rex faithful unto death. You did this, Sarah said when she saw it. Angela helped. She tracked down his service record, found out where he was buried. Garrett's voice was rough. I thought he should be remembered somewhere. With the others who gave everything. Sarah took his hand. He would have loved it here. Yeah. Garrett cleared his throat. Yeah, I think he would have. They stood together in comfortable silence. I have something for you, Sarah said finally. She pulled a small box from her pocket and handed it to him. Garrett opened it. Inside was a silver medallion shaped like a shield, the same design that hung from Shadow's collar. I had it made, Sarah said, for you, because you've been my guardian too, my protector, my everything. Garrett looked at the medallion, then at Sarah. Are you proposing to me with a dog tag? Sarah laughed. I'm thanking you for saving my life, for staying, for helping me build something worth building. Sarah, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that you matter, that what you did matters, that I wouldn't be here without you. Garrett closed his hand around the medallion. I love you, he said quietly. I probably should have said that a long time ago, but I wasn't sure I remembered how. I spent so many years learning not to feel anything, and then you came along and broke all my walls down. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I love you too. Yeah. He kissed her gentle and certain, and somewhere nearby, Shadow barked once in approval. That night, Sarah had a dream. She was 8 years old again, sitting in the back seat of a car. Her mother was driving, phone pressed to her ear, voice raised in anger. I'm taking her and leaving Victor. I don't care what you do. I don't care about your career or your reputation. I won't let you hurt her anymore. The car swerved. Tires squealed. Sarah opened her mouth to scream, but then the dream shifted. She wasn't 8 anymore. She was 25, standing in a field of golden light, and her mother was there, not dying, not afraid, just there. "You did it, baby," her mother said. "You survived. You told the truth. You're everything I hoped you'd be. Mom, I'm so proud of you, Sarah, so proud. I miss you. I know, but I'm not gone, not really. I'm in every brave thing you do, every person you help, every life you save." Sarah reached for her, but the light was fading. "Don't go. I have to. But you don't need me anymore, baby. You have everything you need right here." The light swallowed everything. Sarah woke up crying, but they were different tears. They were the tears of someone who had finally said goodbye. 5 years later, Shadow passed away in his sleep. He was 11 years old, ancient for a German shepherd. His muzzle had gone completely white. His joints had stiffened, his walks had shortened, but his eyes had stayed bright until the very end, always watching Sarah, always protecting her. She buried him in the memorial garden beneath a marble stone, carved with words she had written herself. "Shadow, who taught me that love requires no words," Garrett held her while she cried. Angela came up from her retirement cabin to pay respects. Volunteers and survivors gathered to share stories about the dog who had started it all. And that night, Sarah stood at the window of the farmhouse looking out at the rescue center that bore his name, and she smiled. "We did it, boy," she whispered. "We really did it." The years passed. Shadow's Hope grew into a national organization with centers in 12 states, a model for others to follow. Sarah became an advocate for abuse survivors, speaking at conferences, testifying before Congress, helping to change laws that had protected men like her father. Garrett stayed by her side through all of it. They married in a quiet ceremony at the farm, surrounded by rescue dogs and the people who had become family. They never had children of their own, but they raised hundreds of animals and helped countless survivors find their way back to themselves. On Sarah's 50th birthday, she returned to Pinewood for the first time since the trial. The town had changed. The mansion where she'd grown up had been torn down, replaced by a community center for at-risk youth. The sheriff's office had been reformed, staffed by officers who actually served the community instead of protecting corrupt politicians. She stood where the front door used to be, feeling nothing but peace. "Any regrets?" Garrett asked. Sarah thought about the question. She thought about the girl she used to be, silent, invisible, broken. She thought about the woman she had become, strong, vocal, whole. She thought about Shadow, about her mother, about everyone who had suffered, and everyone who had healed. "No," she said finally. "No regrets." She took Garrett's hand, and they walked away from the past. Together. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that healing is real, and that love, true love, never gives up. Subscribe to our channel and press the notification bell so you never miss a story that uplifts the soul. And if you believe that guardians come in many forms, sometimes with 4 legs, and a loyal heart, sometimes with quiet courage, and an unwavering hand, write Amen in the comments below. Let's fill this space with faith, hope, and gratitude for everyone who has ever stood between the innocent and the darkness. Because sometimes one voice is all it takes to break the silence. And sometimes one word is all it takes to begin again. That word is enough. God bless you all.